One sheriff was sent down the tier to handcuff me. The other sheriff waited outside the all-steel bar door at the front of the tier. Once I was handcuffed, the sheriff found it amusing to use undue force by twisting my wrist, which resulted in an exchange of verbal threats to smash one another. I was serious. I can't speak for the other guy. A minute later, when the electronic door opened, I exploded and broke the handcuffs in two, then dashed toward the burly sheriff, snatching only a piece of his shirt before he escaped through the open door, which immediately closed behind him. I could smell the stench of his relief that he had evaded my grasp. It didn't take long for a mob of sheriffs to respond to the alarm bell. I steeled myself for the inevitable onslaught, but instead, over the loudspeaker, I was repeatedly ordered to return to the cell. Once I calmed down and was back in the locked cell, I was puzzled that the sheriffs did not rush in on me. As a common scenario, this was an opportunity to brutalize or kill me, and then justify it under the law. Around dinner time, an officer appeared to serve the meal. While handing me the food tray, he offered to take off the broken handcuffs, which I refused, believing it was a ruse. Once the officer exited, I went through the ritual inspection of my food, probing for foreign materials visible to the eye. I ate the meal while continuing my vigil for an attack against me, which never came, at least not visibly. That meal had been spiked with a tranquilizer that knocked me out cold. When I regained consciousness, I found myself in the jail's medical unit. I was in excruciating pain from the neck down, harnessed to a steel bunk in 5 points. 5 points refers to 5 leather straps attached to a bunk. Each strap is positioned at one of 4 corners. So I was neither a apoplectic, a stroke victim, nor a narcoleptic. It was apparent the food I had eaten was spiked with a powerful sedative. Later I found out why I was in such pain when I awoke. They really didn't know what to make of me, especially given my ability to rip off the handcuffs from behind. The authorities intentionally labeled me as a powerful madman who needed psychiatric sedation. From the start, it was clear they were trying to make me loony, but why? Whenever the sheriffs wanted to move me from high power to the medical unit to be placed in 5 points, I was drugged. My defiance encompassed a wide variety of offenses in their eyes. If I refused to respond to their insults, paced the cell too much, didn't eat, displayed a facial expression of disdain, did not follow their ridiculous commands, such as stand on one leg in the corner with one hand on top of my head, I was labeled as defiant and then drugged. My only defense was to avoid eating the jail food, so I tried to subsist on store-bought candy to avoid the druggings. I remember devouring so many candy bars, sometimes for weeks on end, they caused serious acne problems and made me constantly nauseated. I didn't want to wake up in 5 points, and I couldn't survive indefinitely on a diet of sweets. Eventually, I had to take my chances and eat what was placed before me by the sheriffs. Though I discussed these matters with each of the 3 successive attorneys who represented me during the 2-year period, nothing was ever done to stop the periodic druggings. On several occasions, despite being drugged, through force of will, I remained semi-conscious enough to witness the sheriff's ritual. Once I appeared to have passed out, they would come into the cell and handcuff me, wrists behind my back, then drag me to the medical unit. Before I was put in 5 points, I was thrown to the floor, then stomped and kicked in the groin and other parts of my body. Though strategically, they avoided head injuries. The sedatives were a fortunate anesthetic that dulled the physical abuse. I felt nothing while all this was going on. It was no longer a mystery why I regained consciousness the majority of the time I felt pain. I now understood why it often hurt in the groin area and why sometimes I urinated blood. The violence was being done to my mind was far worse. I'm convinced there was a deliberate attempt to render me certifiably insane. Sometimes the tranquilizer was administered intravenously by medical staff while I was in 5 points. Its effect would be to suspend me in oblivion for days. Even when I awakened, there was no way to banish the experience from my mind because of the lingering after effects. Drowsiness, poor coordination, slurred speech, and general mental confusion. Other times, the mind-altering drugs would be handed to me by a nurse disguised as part of the hypertension, high blood pressure medication. She would stand and watch to make sure I put all the medication in my mouth, then swallow it. Like any person who's suffering from a physical ailment and wants to get better, I felt obligated to take the medications. And since I was able to recover my drug-blown senses in between these regular druggings, it was easy to dupe me into believing that all the medication I was being given was improving my health. My mind had to be strong enough to override the power of the sedative and burst through the horror of total darkness. I do not remember dreaming during that period. Not even a nightmare pierced my consciousness. Nothingness was all that embraced me during sleep. It was a living death. Waking up, I always felt bewilderment, then despair. I would think, where is my do or die passion? At those moments, the crazed passion that once fortified my boldness, the stimulus familiar to every crip who defied bullets and fought foes, was completely absent. I felt defeated and engulfed by desolation. If there was a psychological value in there, the powers that be, intent to demoralize me, then they succeeded 1,000-fold. Prior to my abduction from South Central, I had spent purposeless years under the influence of drugs such as PCP and LSD. Nevertheless, the psychopharmacology employed against me in the high power proved far more devastating. It was like being buried alive. I felt my brain was suffocating, felt as if I was falling through the space into nothingness. It was nothing like getting high off the street drugs. The medical unit's medication was a mind killer. In May of 1979, I was taken to a Torrance, California court for a pretrial hearing. I sat in the courtroom fully shackled, with bright lights beaming down on me. Physically, I appeared to be in perfect health, but my mind was in a psychotropic uproar. The presiding judge noticed something was wrong. Something about me was not what it should be. He asked if I understood what was going on, but my disjointed mind would not permit me to respond. Instead of words coming out, giggles or laughter overwhelmed me. Other times, I was just completely out of it. At times, I understood what the judge was asking and wanted to answer properly, yet I could not. My disjointed mind and body kept betraying me. The judge turned to my stepfather, Fred, and asked, "Does he get in these moods frequently, Mr. Hollowell, where he won't speak?" My stepfather responded without having the knowledge of me being unlawfully drugged. "Well, he's been on PCP ever since. He goes into strange moods." Court transcripts indicate that the judge said, "All right, well, I'm aware that at least he's alert and looking at me and he's not choosing to respond to my words. But I can't say he's understanding what I say." Common sense would have picked up that something was wrong right then and there. Had I been non-black and exhibited such quaint behavior in a courtroom, I'd have been analyzed by the best psychologists the county had to offer. During the preliminary hearing in April of 1979, the drugging affected me differently. I could laugh, but instead groggily gazed at the inside perimeter of the courtroom and saw that it was overrun with armed bailiffs and undercover detectives. Scanning the room, I noticed that most of the spectators were white, were unknown to me, and wore unmistakably angry expressions. In sharp contrast stood my mother and stepfather, their African features marked by worry rather than fury. Apart from my parents, the crowd radiated a lynch mob's enthusiasm while it waited for the proceedings to start. As in all my courtroom appearances, I was shackled around the waist, wrists, and ankles. I felt like a wild animal. I'm sure to all the strangers, I looked like one too. When the judge read aloud from his record of my presumed sins, a gasp went up from the spectators as he detailed the allegations: multiple robberies and the shotgun murders of 4 people, 3 Asians and 1 Caucasian. I was reduced to marionette status, nodding my head as if when an attorney suggested it, though I comprehended absolutely nothing. Instinctively, I knew to expect the worst from the judicial system, since it reflected society as a whole. I never allowed the self-indulgence of false hope. During the stage of my captivity, facing America's killing apparatus meant no more to me than being given a speeding ticket. The truth was, I didn't care what happened to me or to anyone else. My indifference to life or death was exasperated by my imprisonment. The coerced tranquilizers, I had become a castaway within my own mind. I felt no hope, saw no dreams, expected no bright future. Death was the only reality I anticipated. I was even convinced that love was unattainable and incapable of penetrating my stone-encased heart. I possessed the death look of the wretched. I devalued life since I saw no worth in my own. No matter how many people visited me while I was in the county jail, I still felt alone and abandoned. My smile served as a theatrical means to influence a given circumstance, or as a tight, cold gesture of formality. Not even my beloved mother could reach me on my mental island of drug alienation, an island where I was neither safe nor secure. Under these psychotropic assaults, I probably lent credence to the racist notion that I was subhuman. I believed I was supposed to accept the tribulations inflicted on me while in captivity. So I gritted my teeth and absorbed the injustices, just as many of my slave ancestors had accepted their plight for centuries. There were fleeting moments when I railed against the sheriff's madness, but most of the time I was either too drugged to resist or too acclimated to my outcast status to know that I should challenge what was unjust. Even I, a person who lived as foul as could be, deserved justice. Yet I experienced only a great separation between the system of law and the ethics of justice. Since life for me had always been a callous existence, what was the difference now? If the system wanted to exterminate me, I thought, so what? Feel free to do so. Perhaps I'd fare better in death than in life.